before taking home the movie event of the summer and reliving all of the non-stop action. Don't you want to know why it took over 30 years to make a sequel to Top Gun?
While on one hand, it's true that Paramount, like the rest of Hollywood, is unwilling or unable to gamble on new stories, and as a result has resorted to retelling and rehashing previously established intellectual property with previously established fan bases in order to exploit our collective nostalgia for profit. On the other hand, military recruitment is down, partially as the result of Gen Z not having any connection to the war on terror, partially because Gen Z has no living memory of 9/11, and which for many millennials and for older Americans was a strong motivator to enlist in the military. Perhaps more importantly, with the war in Afghanistan having come to a close in August 2021, the US is not currently engaged in any major war, publicly at least. This is clear even with recruitment numbers, which indicate that the Army will fall short on its 2022 recruitment goal by a staggering 25%. Now, the question that has to be asked is this: what does Top Gun have to do with military recruitment? Well, a lot actually. The original 1986 Top Gun movie was actually co-scripted by the Department of Defense in order to rebrand the Navy in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. According to the Navy, the original Top Gun release in 1986 led to a 500% boost in military recruitment. And honestly, it's easy to see why. Top Gun glamorized the Navy, complete with baby oil, big explosions, and beach volleyball. And just outside the cineplexes where Top Gun was playing, the Navy set up recruiting stations in order to capitalize on the glamorization of war. After 30 years, the Navy is back to recruiting outside of movie theaters with the release of Top Gun Maverick. Now, the propaganda of Top Gun extends beyond the way that America's military is portrayed in the film. In fact, the way America's enemies are portrayed is just as important. During the 80s, the Cold War was in full swing, and even though Top Gun never directly calls out the USSR, it's heavily implied that because Maverick is fighting against Soviet planes, the enemy is the Soviet Union. In present day, however, there is no force diametrically opposed to US hegemony in the same way that the Soviet Union was. Simply put, the US has run out of adversaries. As a piece of war propaganda, Maverick's adversaries are America's adversaries, and having co-scripted the film, just like its predecessor, the DoD was very deliberate in crafting an enemy for Maverick. For that reason, the way the enemy is presented in the movie is not very surprising. On the one hand, they're very clearly a stand-in for Iran, as the mission target is an incomplete uranium enrichment plant that supposedly goes against UN treaties. Though, on the other hand, when these enemy forces are on screen, their faces are never shown, as they are wearing dark visors. This was done very deliberately by the Pentagon, as by obscuring their faces, Maverick's enemies, and by extension America's enemies, are no longer human. When we don't see our adversaries as our fellow man, nothing is off the table when it comes to the brutality we are capable of inflicting. Furthermore, the Pentagon has privately wished for a war in Iran for a while now, and at certain times, those private wishes have been public.
Is that the government of Iran feels no danger from the United States. They think they can act with impunity, even as the Biden administration is on its knees trying to get back into the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. They think they can carry out what in effect is an act of war against trying to kill citizens of the United States on American soil.
While I don't really have anything positive to say about the Iranian regime, it's not the place of the United States to enforce regime change all over the world. A prolonged occupation in the country would be devastating and expensive, and like our efforts in Afghanistan, it would prove a tremendous failure, especially considering the parties involved, namely the DoD and the Pentagon. It's impossible to view Top Gun Maverick as simply a movie, as it's more than that. It's a piece of propaganda. But the movie is a purpose beyond making the military look enticing to kids born after 2001, beyond advertising for Boeing or Lockheed Martin. Something much more sinister, actually. In fact, by presenting their military as an organization of faceless, inhuman monsters, Top Gun Maverick serves to normalize the idea of an occupation of Iran in the American consciousness. And it made over $1 billion in the box office doing so. I'm Ethan Kroon with Massachusetts for Peace Action.